One of the most significant and important events in deaf history in the United States is called Deaf President Now. It's sometimes abbreviated DPN, and it's actually somewhat recent in deaf history. So it starts at Gallaudet University. Gallaudet University, as you know, was the first school in the world for advanced education for the deaf and hard of hearing. In 1856, Amos Kendall, who's pictured here, a postmaster general during two presidential administrations, donated 2 acres of his estate in Northeast Washington, D.C. to establish a school and housing for 12 deaf and 6 blind students. The following year, Kendall persuaded Congress to incorporate the new school. It was called Columbia Institute. Edward Minor Gallaudet, son of Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, who was the founder of the first school for the deaf in the United States in Connecticut, became the new school's superintendent. Edward was what we call today a coda, a child of a deaf adult. Edward's mother, Sophia Fowler Gallaudet, was deaf. She was the school's founding matron and played a key role in lobbying Congress for the establishment of the school. Congress authorized the institution to confer college degrees in 1864, and President Abraham Lincoln signed the charter. Edward Minor Gallaudet was made president of the institution, including the college. He presided over the first commencement in June 1869, when 3 young men received diplomas signed by President Ulysses S. Grant. To this day, the diplomas of all Gallaudet graduates are signed by the current U.S. president. In 1894, the name of the college portion of the institution was changed to Gallaudet College in honor of Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, and through an act of Congress in 1954, the entire institution became known as Gallaudet College. In 1986, Congress again amended the charter of the institution, renaming it Gallaudet University. By 1987, Gallaudet had 6 presidents, all of whom were hearing. When President Jerry C. Lee, who's pictured here, announced he would step down, a search for a new president began. There were over 80 applicants, which the Board of Trustees narrowed down to 3, 2 deaf and 1 hearing. Students, staff, and alumni were hopeful that the world's only liberal arts university for the deaf would finally be led by a deaf person. So they and other friends of the deaf community joined a nationwide campaign and a rally asking the Board of Trustees to select a deaf president. On Sunday, March 6, 1988, the board voted Elizabeth Zinser, who was hearing and knew 1 ASL sign, she knew I love you, as the 7th president of Gallaudet University. Students were both shocked and outraged, and they demanded an explanation. Board Chair Jane Spillman, who is there on the left with the yellow shirt, responded, "We picked her because she is a very talented educator." Spillman is quoted as saying, "Deaf people are not ready to function in a hearing world," which she denied. But regardless, students felt Spillman's attitude was dismissive. At dawn the next morning, Gallaudet students took control of the campus. They blocked every entrance and came up with 4 demands. Number 1, Zinser resign and a deaf president be installed. Number 2, Board Chair Spillman resign. Number 3, 51% of the board should be deaf. And number 4, no reprisals against any student who was, taking part in blocking every entrance and taking control of campus. When Spillman and the board members arrived for a meeting at noon with representatives, the demands were presented to them. At the end of a 3-hour meeting, Spillman announced that the board rejected the demands of the students, and they stood with the selection of Zinser. Deaf faculty member Harvey Goodstein told the audience that the demands had not been met, and everyone walked out. You can see Harvey Goodstein right here in this photo walking through the middle. So Spillman is speaking on the right. There's an interpreter on the left, and he just interrupted. He just walked through and announced, "Hey, they have rejected all of our demands." So everybody got up and walked out. Tuesday, March 8th was a day of protests and rallies. Students boycotted classes. Media attention had reached a national level, and reporters started flocking to campus. On Wednesday, two members of Congress on the Board of Trustees met with a small group from Gallaudet. Elizabeth Zinser decided to come to DC early, she wasn't there yet, to begin her presidency in order to calm the situation. She met with student leaders who urged her to resign, but she refused. There was overwhelming support of Gallaudet students by many people around the world. Zinser and Spillman later met with the same members of Congress who encouraged them to resign. That night, Ted Koppel of ABC News interviewed Zinser, student body president Greg Hilbach, and actress Marlee Matlin. In the interview, Zinser said she had the support of the board, so she was not convinced that she should resign. Hilbach interjected, "She said she was not convinced because she got some indication of support, but I think that the reason she is not convinced is because she doesn't have access to the community and there is no dialogue." Thursday, March 10th. The rallies continued all day. Donations flowed in. The American Postal Workers Union president hand-delivered a check of $5,000. In the afternoon at Gallaudet's Chapel Hall, Dr. I. King Jordan, one of the deaf candidates for president, retracted his previous statement of support. He said, "So yesterday, because I have been a candidate and wanted to be both reasonable and fair, I gave a statement recognizing the legal authority of the board to name the president of Gallaudet University. In fact, my personal reaction to the board's decision was and is anger at the continuing lack of confidence. The students, joined by the staff and faculty, have focused the world's attention on the larger issue. I must now publicly affirm my support for the point of view held by the Gallaudet community. The four demands are entirely justified." Friday, March 11th. In the morning, over 2,500 protesters marched from Gallaudet University to the U.S. Capitol carrying the Martin Luther King "We Still Have a Dream" banner lent to them by the MLK Museum. Later that day, Dr. Zinser gave this statement saying she was responding to the deaf community, not student demands. She said, "I concluded, therefore, that the best way to restore order and return this university to its business of education was to pave the way for the Board of Trustees to consider the selection of a president who is hearing impaired. I tendered my resignation last night." On Sunday, March 13th, Dr. Jordan was chosen as the president of Gallaudet University, and Jane Spillman announced, "Today, I submitted my resignation from the chairmanship of the Board of Trustees of Gallaudet University. I took this step willingly because I believe strongly that it is in the best interest of the university." Dr. Jordan became the first deaf president of Gallaudet University, leading deaf people and the world with his statement, "Deaf people can do anything except hear." So why did DPN, Deaf President Now, matter so much to the deaf community?